This episode is brought to you by Cobury Digital.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Entrepreneur Rush. On our plate today is a digital customer journey and how a better understanding of that can improve your return on investment. Without further ado, Emil, I hear you talk about this so much with clients, right? And warning them. Why is the digital customer journey so important? And, what does it mean? What are the consequences of not understanding it or mixing it up with the physical customer journey?
I absolutely love this question. I do, Thomas. The digital customer journey is just one of the most interesting, aspects of digitalization and in online marketing today. And it's surprising to me how many people don't understand it, don't even try to realize that there's a difference between that and the physical customer journey, and that even the digital customer journey that we've known for a lot of years is evolving and changing as more and more platforms are coming, as the new generations are demanding more engagement, etc. So you really want to dig in, delve in, understand the digital customer journey and keep evolving with it. I think the main consequence of not understanding the digital customer journey is repeatedly pursuing customers anew, right? So you already have a series of customers that have shown an interest in your product. And if you do not understand the digital customer journey, what will happen is you pay to start over again and again and again. And let me give you an example of that. Like a typical example of the digital customer journey is having someone that's visited your website, shown an interest in your product, and left without purchasing. And now what a lot of people do, because they're used to the physical customer journey, is they assume that person wasn't interested. You did not buy my product. I'm going to pursue a ton of new people that can now visit my website. And what happens is that just becomes a lot more expensive. You know this from your marketing efforts, Thomas, but what happens is that you're just starting all over again, right? You're right back to the awareness stage. You're right back to pushing out your message, convincing someone to click on your website, which is already expensive, and then once again trying to sell to him, rather than accepting that sometimes people leave, because that's how the digital customer journey works, and we'll get into that in a second, but they're still interested, and it's a lot cheaper to say we've gotten them part of the way to a purchase, and now we're going to fulfill that. We're going to finish.
Yeah, I totally agree. We both run Facebook ads. We both see those campaigns, the remarketing campaigns with ROASs 2, 3, 4, 5 times higher than those with the cold audiences. And that's not even counting, what's the difference between a remarketing audience on Facebook and the cold audiences, or, the cold clicks that we get through Google or LinkedIn. The difference is massive. Every time, you get someone new into this funnel, you want to keep them, you want to run them through, and you want to hit them with stuff that's less expensive. Facebook is less expensive than Google already, but if you can hit them with a newsletter, that's already so much better. And you just want to use all these technical tools to really drive down those prices.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're seeing it indirectly in recent times. You used to have the good old cold calling, right? You have a list of people that you assume are interested in your product based on some background, and you call them up, and anyone that's done this knows that it converts horribly, right? You call hundreds of people per each conversion, if not more. And what we're seeing in recent times is people are filling out some sort of a lead form online. So it's a quiz, you've shown an interest in a product, you'd like to know more about it, and then you have someone, quote unquote, cold call, and suddenly it converts amazingly well because there's that little bit of interest. And that's exactly what we're talking about here, because once you've visited a website or you've already seen an ad and engaged with the post, well, you've shown that little bit of interest and you are going to convert better.
So, Emil, we've kind of dived right into this, right into how to use this digital customer journey, touched upon that lightly. We'll obviously get more into the gritty details later, but let's take a step back real quick and let's take a look at, what is the physical customer journey? What's a digital customer journey? What's the difference there?
Absolutely. Let's have a look at it. So the main difference between the two is in the amount of touch points. So how many times a person has to hear about your business before committing. Now, in the physical customer journey, how we usually go about it is there's some sort of awareness. People need to become aware that they need your product and that they can get it at your store. That's either 1 or 2 touch points, depending on the setup. So it could be one touch point in that they see your ad, they realize they need the product, and obviously they know they can go buy it at your place because it was your ad. Alternatively, they find out somewhere else that they need your product and they conduct some sort of preliminary research to find out where they can get it. There might also be preliminary research as to the price, etc., right? But that's usually 1 or 2 stages in the awareness. So figuring out you want the product and where you can get it. And then you usually only have 1, max 2 steps more, because the person goes to the physical store, they get the customer service they need, and they decide whether or not they want the product. Very rarely do we go down there, face people right in the eye, receive the customer service for a product we want, and say, actually, I'm going to go home and go get it elsewhere, right? Maybe for big purchases, but it's very, very rare.
Yeah, and on top of that, if you count, recently where due to lockdown regulations and so on, you even have to wait in line for 30 minutes. I mean, wait in line for 30 minutes, walk into the store, get great customer service, find the product you like, and then say no to go to another store and wait another 30 minutes in line. I mean, that's just unthinkable.
Absolutely. I mean, the commitment is much higher. You're spending more time, and you also are very likely to receive the things you need while you're there, right? Because you do have the product right in front of you. You can try it. You have the guaranteed customer service. I mean, unless someone is just doing a horrible job down there, you're going to commit because you've already, seen the price. You've conducted your preliminary research. And even if you haven't, well, you're well aware that the prices are probably pretty similar. So people will convert at a much earlier stage. They only need these 2 to 4 touch points. And that's really where the main difference lies. Because now if we tie this to the digital customer journey, the average purchase falls after 11 touch points. Just think about that for 1 second, right? 11 times. You'll have to reach your customer 11 times across different platforms. That's just a lot of attention that you have to provide, right? Because you can't just have 11 similar touch points. It has to be 11 touch points with different information. And of course, it's different, right? It depends on the price of the product, the customer, etc. This is on average, but you will, in any case, have a lot more touch points.
Yeah, I mean, it's 11 against the, 4 of the physical customer journey?
Yeah, at best.
So we have 11 touch points, right? Where do you start? What are the first couple touch points? How do you get those in?
Right. So in the physical one, we had the awareness, preliminary research, and you purchase the product. Whereas in the digital one, we sort of have similar steps, although they're multiplied, right? There are several avenues to achieve it. So first of all, we have awareness. This one's pretty similar. You're running some sort of an ad or there's a word of mouth, etc. And then there's preliminary research. Those two largely overlap because they're both conducted primarily online. Where it starts to differ is in the third step, because in the physical one, you went down to the store, you can try the product, you have the guaranteed customer service, you can ask your questions. Online, this is not so much the case. You visit the website, and the closest you get to customer service is the story they're telling, the unique selling points, the text they've written, and perhaps if you're lucky, a live chat, etc. And therefore, you sort of have more steps. Additionally, what changes is that you made this commitment in the physical customer journey of already going down there. So if you feel like you're not ready, or if you want to talk to your husband or your kids about the product you're buying, or whatever it is you're doing, well, it's not a very big commitment to say, I'll visit this website later. I'll simply leave it and I'll get back to it. And that's where you want to build on those touch points, right? By following up in your advertising, by providing new information to people that left your website after showing an interest, or people that watched your video online but didn't then commit to a purchase, etc.
Yeah, I mean, it's this commitment that is so lacking in the digital customer journey, if you think about it, right? The cookie will even save your cart and so on, so you can put it all in, leave it, and come back later.
Yeah, totally. It's the commitment. And I think it's also important to remember that beyond just commitment, it's just that the flow of information is very different. I mean, as I pointed out, right? You have it all in a physical store. I mean, he's right there. Ask him the questions you have. You want to go for a ride on the bike? Go ahead. I mean, buying a bike online, it's difficult, right? Is it the right size? Is it the right model? How does it work? Do I really want this? How does it compare to my current bike? All of those are questions that are really, really difficult to answer in a single website visit based on an FAQ on a video. I mean, you really need more touch points.
Yeah, and I mean, if you then also look at reviews, right? When you go down to the physical store, the most you can do is ask the salesman, have you used this bike? What do people say? Do people like it? And so on. And often, the salesman will tell you, oh yeah, my kid has this bike, or, I use these shoes myself, and will tell you great things about them. But if you go to the online store, right, there's, first of all, no one to tell you this. I mean, the store might have, the description and might have some reviews there, some testimonials. But most people will go and look for more reviews, Amazon's 200 reviews on almost any product, right? Or if you go to sites like Reddit or Quora, you will see reviews like this. And so you have people already going to your site, hopping off to go read these reviews, and they might never come back.
Yeah, absolutely. They might never come back. And I mean, I think this is one of those interesting ones that this was very important in the digital customer journey previously because people were completely ignoring the concept of social proof. Nowadays, luckily, we're seeing huge improvements on landing pages, right? Businesses are understanding that they need to tell a story on their landing page. They need to show a video that creates security, trustworthiness. They need to present the product so you can, quote unquote, try it without trying it. And you need to have reviews, right? So people are making better landing pages, and that is definitely helping the amount of touch points. But the issue is, as you're doing that, the flow of information, the amount of information you're receiving in a single visit increases. And so despite better landing pages, we're really not seeing, the digital customer journey nearing the physical one in terms of touch points because it's just too much information. You don't want it all at once on a phone. And you might not be in the same frame of mind when you're then visiting the website, right? Because you saw an ad on Facebook, it's 10 in the evening, you're just clicking because it seemed interesting. Are you really going to conduct perfect research? Whereas if you're committing to visiting a store, you've actually done your preliminary research. You're not just going to go there and see, all right, and waste your time, unless, of course, you're in town, etc. But these are really the exceptions, right? So I absolutely agree with you. There are important elements, and there are a lot of reasons that people leave the website. But even if you gave them all the right answers, even if you made the perfect landing page that had it all right there, for the large majority of products, the ones that are a bit more complicated or a bit more expensive, you're never going to see the digital customer journey go down to an average of 3-4 touch points.
Exactly. Yeah. We have the data to prove it, to back it up, right? You need around 11 to convert a customer, but often it's more, especially depending on the price of the product, right? The more expensive it is, the more you need to follow up with that customer and show them more content, tell more stories, give them more USPs. Let's focus in on how to take advantage of this digital customer journey, right? Up until now, we've made it sound like, physical customer journey, you only need 4 touch points to sell. It's much shorter, it's much faster, you have all these advantages, but we haven't actually talked about the advantages of the digital customer journey where, it is easier to sell online, even though you need the touch points.
Yeah, totally. And I think there are a lot of elements to this, right? We'll cover them all. I think that the main one that a lot of people forget about, because of course, I know what you're about to say, Thomas. You have more tools online. It's a lot easier to take advantage. You have higher retention rates. And all of this is absolutely true. And that's why digital is the future, right? Some of those you could also take advantage of in the physical one. I think the one advantage that online will always have is accessibility. Say I'm running an ad at 10 in the evening for my physical store and I've convinced you to buy my product. What are you going to do? Go knock on my door? It's closed. You can't get it. But online, if I actually convinced you, you're going to go there right now and purchase it. So this accessibility is impossible to compete with the physical stores. And that's just why that regardless of how much we evolve in our physical stores, regardless of how much we take advantage of the digital customer journey, we're never going to be able to fully compete with an online store that will then manage to take advantage of all these tools and provide it. And that's also why I think we're seeing more and more showrooms, right? With bikes, we have Specialized, we have Canon, we have all of these high-end brands that will have stores not to sell you the product, but so that you can go and try it, see it for yourself, etc. But the main action still takes place online. And I also see online stores realizing that it's very difficult to try it. I mean, with Zalando, you have free returns, right? So you don't know if it fits? Well, order 3 different sizes, send the 2 back that don't fit, and we'll pay for it all. So you know that the digital customer journey is just beautiful. And despite sounding a lot more difficult, which perhaps it is, right? It has more touch points, it's more technical. The opportunity there is much higher, and you can just do so much more.
Totally agree, Emil. I mean, there's a reason we've seen brick and mortar stores close and the growth of e-commerce businesses in general over the past 3 years. But now, as you mentioned, this accessibility has really made a huge difference when it comes to the lockdowns, right? You see people not being able to go into normal stores, but shopping online.
Yeah, totally. And I think the interesting thing here is because I want our listeners to not get confused here, because all that the lockdowns did, right, was make an existing case even more clear. This was going to happen. We might have been, propelled forward a couple of years or even a decade, according to some people, right? But the thing is, it was going to happen no matter what. I mean, this is not just a case of lockdowns and now things are going to go back to normal. No, like this simply made it very, very clear to everyone how difficult it's going to be for physical stores. And I think for a lot of people that were sort of using physical stores before, they realized, damn, there's a lot of advantages to online stores. I mean, one of the main ways you see that, we have a lot of web shops, right, that have increased in purchases, obviously, in this period. And the feedback we're getting from these customers that were used to shopping in our physical stores is that they're saying, oh, this is really, really easy, right? They're realizing, wow, it has a lot of advantages. And until you try that, it's going to be difficult to sort of feel the difference. But now that more and more people have opened their eyes up for the opportunities to shop online, more and more people have realized that you can achieve similar results as a customer, well, this whole process has just gotten propelled. And so I think despite lockdowns helping the case and obviously making this happen even faster, it's just important to remember that this was going to happen despite COVID-19.
Agreed, Emil. Yeah. It's a trend. It's continued. It's been exacerbated, but we're definitely going to see this continue. Let's move on a bit to the to the actual technical aspects, we mentioned a bit at the beginning and have been, touching upon throughout. Where do we start, Emil?
Oh, absolutely. I love this one because, one thing is understanding that there's a difference and you need to take advantage, but how do you do it, right? We're talking a lot about these tools. So let's jump right into it, right? Which tools do you take advantage of? Which platforms do you use and how do you combine them? So first of all, in understanding it, it's important to know that it's not just about the digital touch points, right? It's also about realizing that there's a sort of purchasing funnel so that whether it's the physical journey or the digital journey, right, there's a process that the consumer has to go through from becoming aware of the product to receiving the branding and attention they need and down to the purchasing. So I think once you realize that there's sort of a funnel, you can apply this in the way that you approach it and you can sort of think, okay, what am I trying to achieve with each touch point? And I will in a second get to the actual touch point and how you do it, but it's just very, very important for a second here to think in that frame of mind, because if you're just thinking of amount of touch points, what will happen is either you're saying the same thing 11 times or you're trying to push the wrong message at the wrong time, and then the amount of touch points is not going to help you, right? If you start with selling and then commit to storytelling later on, well, you've already lost most of your audience. So think in terms of sort of an actual funnel, right? We have to take them from the very top of the awareness and somehow push them through a couple of steps to then eventually hit a purchasing stage and perhaps retention. So for the actual tools, Thomas, I actually think you're the right one to ask here, right? You work technically a lot with Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, all of these channels, and you sort of tie together several layers so you push them through this funnel I just mentioned. So let's take Facebook, right? The most important platform, the biggest platform at this point in time for advertising. How would you go about it? How do you ensure you get the first touch point and how do you build on that?
The important thing is to always keep an open mindset, right? We have all these platforms that you mentioned, including Google. And when you combine all of these, that's when you can really, get the most out of it. That's when you can have these touch points happening on different platforms, which you need to do, by the way, because otherwise you won't get the high enough number at a good enough quality. But yeah, Facebook is one of the places where, most of this does then happen, just because while you can get leads or clicks relatively well on LinkedIn or Google, the price is relatively high at the same time. So what you want to do with Facebook is you want to be running both cold campaigns and then warmer campaigns, right? So you want to be both targeting the top of the funnel, the awareness stage, the part of, moving them down slightly through that. But you also want to be doing the actual purchasing and retention there.
All right, so just to make it a little bit clearer to some of our newer listeners that aren't used to digital marketing, so cold and warm audiences, what do you mean here, Thomas?
So basically, a cold audience is an audience that doesn't yet know about you, right? It's an audience it's a person that is just living their life, browsing through Facebook, and has never heard of you before. And then there's obviously different degrees of cold and warm, right? And the warmer this person gets, that means the more they know about your business, right? The first ad they see, they're already starting to move along that process. Once they've visited your website, they're a bit warmer. And once they've purchased, have you been using your product for a bit and are just in love with it, that's when they're getting really, really warm and starting to become fans.
Absolutely love it. So in theory, right, a cold audience could be an interest on Facebook. It's that you're interested in soccer, you're this age, you live here, therefore you're seeing my ad, right? You might not have heard about me, but I've assumed based on my research that you're interested in it. So it's interest groups, etc. And then you have slightly warmer elements, which could be, people that are similar to existing customers. They're sort of in between the cold and the warm. And then you're near the warm phase, right, where they visited your website, perhaps added to cart, purchased your product, or maybe a friend has heard of it, right? That's another one of those in-between ones. And it comes in different levels, like you explained. But it really goes from the interest base, the sort of the largest type of cold one we have. And depending on the platform, right, you could argue that something like Google is also a cold audience. It's a different kind of cold audience, though, because they're saying, I'm interested in this, right? I want a digital agency in Chicago. So it's very important not to get them mixed up. It's not about whether or not they've heard of your company already. It's also about their sort of interest and their engagement in it.
Exactly. Yeah, I wanted to add there's kind of two layers here. There's, are they interested? How likely are they to purchase, and whether they've heard about you, right? And all of these things play a role together. So whether they've visited your website before or not, that, moves them along, determines where they are on the scale, whether they're already interested in your product, right? If they're searching for your specific product or service, they're already moving along that level. If they're a lookalike audience on Facebook, they're similar to your customers, that already means they're a bit warmer. So it's a multi-layered scale kind of from cold to warm. And the warmer they are, the more likely they are to convert. The colder they are, the more work you have to do to get them to convert.
And the more work you have to do, the more expensive it is. So that is why we're telling you, understand the digital customer journey, build on the existing ones you already have. You'd be surprised how many people have already visited your website, how many people have already engaged with your content on social media. Sell to them first and then build on, right? That's sort of the main takeaway here in terms of why the digital customer journey is so important. But real quick, Thomas, so this was very abstract. So how would you actually go about it? Now, I'm creating a Facebook ad. I've made this interest group. They've visited my website. Now what? How do I build the layers? Do I just say, okay, because you visited my website, I'm going to remarket to you, and now you've seen my ad twice? Or how do we make sure they take several elements of your advertising? How do we build an actual funnel using Facebook? And how do we then later on combine this, taking advantage of other platforms?
All right, yeah, let's get right into it. Let's get into the technical details. We obviously can't actually run you through how exactly to set this up. I mean, there's simply too many platforms, too many different ways, and too many small details that we'd have to, go through. And a podcast obviously isn't the right medium for this. But basically, there's 4 ways to move someone from, they've seen the first ad to the next levels of the funnel. And then also in the future, to differentiate between someone who's interacted well and, you want to move them on, you want to keep them at that stage, or you want to kick them out. And the 4 are, right, you have the classic remarketing, they visited your webpage, the pixel tracked them, now you can remarket to them. This works on almost every platform. You have video views, right? They viewed a certain percentage or a certain amount of your video. You can then retarget that. This works especially well on Instagram and Facebook. And then you have, you collect emails. Now, the way this works is usually through a lead form, a pop-up, or whatever. And with that email, you can usually upload that to certain platforms and retarget to them there. You can also, send them newsletters. And finally, you have the very simple, they've engaged with your content on that platform. They've liked your post, so liked your organic post, or liked your ads, or commented there, or engaged with it in some other way.
Absolutely. And those are the 4 main ways that really seem to apply almost everywhere. There are some that are more advanced where you can upload different feeds, etc., where you can build different funnels. But those are the primary ones. They've been around for a while and they seem like they're going to stay, right? And of course, new ones will arrive. But I think what's really important to understand here, because a lot of people will say, well, we already have a funnel, right? We have remarketing. You visit my website and now I can just chase you forever. And yes, that's true, but you can't differentiate. That's the major difference, or at least it's really, really difficult to do unless you have large amounts of visitors. Because if you're just retargeting to anyone that visited your website, how do you know at what stage in your funnel they are? How do you make sure they don't see the same video twice? How do you make sure that they see the message they need right away? So to give you an example is, right, you visit the website. Now I want to tell you a story because that's the next level, right? Then I want to provide social proof. Then I want to build on that. And then eventually I want to sell to you. Well, you can't do that with the core remarketing way. It's going to be very difficult and you can't do it perfectly. You can try to set it up. You can try to make exceptions, right? You haven't visited the card yet, but you visited this page. So therefore, it's not great. By taking advantage of these other mediums, what you can do is you can say you've seen 25% of my video, you've seen 50%, you've seen 75%. You can even retarget based on how much info they have specifically, show them another video. You can send them depending on what they've seen on the website. So say they've visited your website, seen your product, but they haven't read your About Us page. Well, now you can show them a video that story tells, right? You're not repeating yourself. They're getting your story for the first time. And you can then retarget that video with information, again, based off of the pixel that they don't have. So maybe on your website, they did actually really research your product. So you don't have to tell them more about the product. Perhaps you have to tell them more about why they should trust you as a vendor, right? So your advantages in terms of delivery, returns, social proof, testimonials, all of those things. So really, yeah, you can do it in a lot of ways, but you want to use all of those different aspects to guarantee a perfect funnel in which you're not just repeating yourself or trying to sell to people when they're not ready. I mean, the perfect example is you're asking your friend out for a beer. He says, no, I don't drink. And you ask him the same thing the day after. That won't work, right? That'll be the same thing with your funnel if you're just sending the same message. Now that we know he doesn't, drink, we can tell him, well, a lot of our friends are going to be there. They have water. You can find different reasons that he should buy it.
Exactly. And, that brings us back to the original 11 touch points we've been talking about. It's not show my ad to this person 11 times and eventually, you'll break them down, you'll break down the barriers and get them to convert. No, it's show them 11 different angles, get in touch with them 11 times. And, sometimes it will take more, especially when it's a more expensive product. But basically, hit them from different angles and really convince them to convert. And what you really want to do here, and Emil, you touched upon this, is you want to be on every platform because they will not wait forever to convert, right? They're constantly being bombarded with ads and, constantly in need of certain products or services. And you want to get those 11 touch points to them as quickly as possible. And they're just not spending enough time on Facebook and Instagram. So you do need to get them on different platforms at different times.
Absolutely. And more importantly, they're consuming content differently depending on their platform they're on. I mean, the message they want from you on Facebook is not the same they want on Instagram. So on Facebook, you can tell your story, right? It's great for longer storytelling. Whereas on Instagram, people prefer very short captions. So there you focus on the imagery of the video. Similarly, people go on TikTok to have very brief answers to things or for this typical sort of influencer aspect that we know of, right? So again, think about what they're trying to achieve. On LinkedIn, give them the very professional message, give them just the facts. On Facebook, tell your story. On Instagram, provide the beautiful imagery. On TikTok and YouTube, show your video. Like really consider what they want from each platform, where they are in the current part of their customer journey, and how to take advantage of that given what they're doing at this very moment.
Totally agree, Emil. Now, we've been talking a lot about different aspects of the digital customer journey. We've talked about, how it's different from the physical one, how you then technically execute on that. But let's try to, get that red thread in here. What's the main takeaway?
Ooh, this is going to be a difficult one, right? Because the digital customer journey and the difference from the journey we've known for thousands of years is not just something you can sum up. But I think what we can do is, right, we can tell you that the main thing to understand here is that the two are different and you have to treat them differently. The main thing to understand is that there are several tools available online that there aren't physical. You have to take advantage of those. You have to realize that you have a huge advantage in being accessible all the time, but that there are also downsides. You're not invincible just because you're online. I mean, people can't smell your product. They can't use your product the same way. You really want to be more creative. And sort of in this, most importantly of all of it, that there are more touch points in the digital customer journey. And this will change. It will go up and down, but there will always be more touch points in the digital customer journey because it's just hard to provide the same amount of information and have the same dialogue going on. And so when you understand that, you then realize that whether it's you or your marketing team or part of your strategy, you just need to consider this, right? You need to consider where are people in the customer journey? Am I maybe letting go of customers too early? And also, of course, that we haven't touched upon today, at some point you need to let them go. We also see people that have embraced the digital customer journey and that are now showing things 100, 200 times for products that are never going to be profitable. So really consider all aspects here, right? At what point are they not interested? Should I maybe not retarget all website visitors? If I have tens of thousands, should I maybe retarget people that have shown a specific interest or visited certain websites? And the same goes for your video views, right? People that watched a certain amount. Especially engagement is a difficult one. A lot of people just retarget to anyone that engaged with their ads, and then they run any of their posts, and they run a lot of competitions, and a lot of those people just aren't interested in buying your product. So really consider the level of engagement that you would target and how long you're willing to pursue people, and of course adapt this depending on the price and complications of your product.
And to kind of give a second takeaway to everyone out there, who has a physical business, who has a brick and mortar store, just because, the digital customer journey is different from the physical one does not mean, you can ignore it and, don't have to understand it. In fact, what we've been talking about here today is very much applicable to your store as well. By adopting some of these tools, collecting email addresses, collecting information on your customers, which then allows you to retarget them online, that's a game changer. And that's something we're seeing being introduced in stores slowly, but not quite fast enough.
And I think that's going to be it for today's episode, everyone. We hope you enjoyed it. A lot of information, a lot of value. Pay attention, understand the difference, and you can really, really explode your business. And now's the time to share and subscribe.